All right, we'll move ahead towards weather here, and I think what overall is probably a, a better satisfactory to maybe even better than normal outlook here as we look ahead. Looking at the last week, the big story with northwesterly flow aloft across the region, of course, and we talked about this last week and the week before. We've had unfortunately this season we've had some cooler than normal temperatures in the upper right here. You see that our mean temperatures for the week range from 2 to 3 degrees below normal across southern areas to as much as 5 degrees below normal north. And again, given our delays this year, that is certainly concerning. But most of the region you can see, except for the far southeastern part of the Corn Belt, also averaged below normal. Rainfall was just like it has been the last couple of weeks, very, very spotty, location specific, but generally ranging here from less than 1/4 of an inch over some eastern portions of lower Michigan to more than 2 inches at a few spots in the west and in the north. So again, it depended on where you were, what county, what township. In some cases, I think looking at our season collectively here and thinking back about the cool temperatures, there definitely was a change in our degree day totals here. If we look at those seasonally, that's the lower left here. We have lost a little bit of ground relative to normal. This image depicts again our seasonal totals beginning May 1, and that was a wishful thinking for many people in terms of when they actually planted. But it gives us, I think, an idea of where degree day totals are through the 3rd of September here. But you can see departure-wise, we're still pretty close to normal in the far southeastern part of the state, but in the north, minimum 100 units, space 50 or more. Some cases almost 200 units, space 50 behind normal. And again, we lost a little bit of ground given the cooler than normal temperatures of the last week. That's I think one of the certainly take homes. The dryness also continued in many areas of the state. Our quick drought response index from the National Drought Mitigation Center in Lincoln, you can see some worsening of the moisture situation, especially across, extreme northern lower Michigan and extreme eastern upper Michigan. That area in particular might be arguably about the driest area of the state relative to normal, but there's also a swath here across the lower peninsula from the southwest corner through south central on northeastward up towards Saginaw Bay and the Thumb, which also lost ground in terms of water accumulations. As a result here, the U.S. Drought Monitor, again from the Drought Mitigation Center, actually upgraded most areas of the state. And I guess one of the reasons I also put this up here, 2 months ago, there was no abnormal dryness, no categories of anything across the state of Michigan, and we've gone from, at least in some parts of the state, we've gone from one extreme with too much water to too little. And you can see that they actually did upgrade things somewhat in the northern lower and eastern upper, moving them into a D1 or moderate drought category with about 65% or just a little under 65% of the state now in some type of an abnormal dryness category, either D0 or D1. So that definitely also increased over during the course of the week. Well, let's look at where we are right now. We've got a big area of high pressure sitting right over lower Michigan here this morning, and that is responsible for our clear, calm conditions here this morning. Hurricane Dorian is approaching the coast of South Carolina down in the southeast. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that won't have any impact on us. It certainly will for the eastern seaboard, but not for us in Michigan. And our next weather system here in Michigan, you can see is a relatively weak area of low pressure. It's associated with a trough moving across from west to east across North America. That's our next chance for precipitation, beginning here mostly later this afternoon, overnight, and then into tomorrow morning. But it will not be, given where it is and that it has relatively limited moisture to work with, it will not be a big rain producer. But certainly that is the next chance for precip that we have. This high pressure you'll see here in the next image. I think I've got, I do have one more, a timely one. With that high pressure sitting over the state this morning, I think it's worth noting, if you haven't read these little weather station plots here, the red numbers here are the air temperatures. This was as of 6:30 this morning here across the upper Midwest, but with well, a couple combination of things: the high pressure, clear, calm conditions, dry air, and dry soils. Actually, we do have some air temperatures. You can see here, Houghton Lake was actually reporting 36 this morning. So we did have some scattered frost. That's certainly cold enough. These temperatures are taken at a 5-foot level above the surface. So temperatures at the surface typically are a couple degrees or a few degrees colder than that. It's not a freeze or widespread freezing conditions or anything like that, but it's still a sign of the times. And also, again, given the weather pattern that we've been in, and a reminder of the calendar, it is the first week of September. So we did have a little bit of scattered frost. Wouldn't be surprised, especially low-lying areas and areas where cold air ponds. Most of the state, though, you can see did remain mostly in the 40s, some low 50s across the south. By tomorrow, you can see the hurricane approaching the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Right now, I think the money is that the Dorian probably will make landfall. That was looking iffy here as either a weak Category 3 or a strong Category 2 hurricane. Major tidal influences with this particular storm. With high water, there will be flooding and a fairly large storm surge, and in some cases more than 20 inches of rain. So major problems for the southeastern coast. But again, for us, and I guess we hinted at this storm's been around for over a week and a half now. No influence on us here in the upper Midwest or in Michigan. We do have that weather system, though, that we just saw from yesterday that will bring the chance for some showers. Again, the best chances will be overnight tonight in northern parts of the state, and then tapering off with little or no or dry conditions or fair conditions expected again by the afternoon tomorrow. Again, best chances for northern parts of the state, and where it does rain, probably a couple tenths of an inch or less. So nothing really heavy expected with this. By Saturday morning here at 8 o'clock, you can see Michigan basically dry, and that's I think a fairly good describer of our weekend forecast here. Fair, cool, and dry. We're in northwesterly flow. You can see the hurricane off the New England coast and headed towards the Canadian Maritimes, ultimately maybe towards Greenland, and then finally out of off of our weather maps, and then something that the cleanup will certainly commence and begin. But for us, weather-wise, this big area of high pressure out of Canada, that's the next weather feature, and it will be here over the weekend and into early next week. So after later today and tomorrow, the next chance for anything significant in terms of precip probably not coming until at least the beginning, if maybe even later, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And right now, even looking at the forecast guidance, it does not look like anything major. So this northwesterly flow, cooler and drier than normal pattern in general is expected to continue for at least next several days. But there is a change indicated after the middle of next week, and what we will see is a modification of our upper air pattern across much of the upper Midwest. Oh, rain gauge, I forgot the expected precip totals. Didn't want to short that, but they will vary across the state, or expected to vary here. Greatest totals over the next week will be across far northern areas, with some cases maybe more than an inch. Some of that will be occurring again over the next 24 hours, and then again early next week. But the numbers decrease as you go south. Less than 1/4 of an inch is expected across the far southern part of the state. That likely will be the driest. So where do we go after that? I mentioned a change, and if you look here at the 6 to 10, both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks are in agreement on this and call for basically the troughing feature that's been stuck across the upper Midwest and the Northeast will move on off to the east and will be replaced by southwesterly flow. And again, we've seen that enough here to know that should lead to a moderation in temperatures. I would expect to see at least some of that at the beginning of this by the middle to latter part of next week. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe some 80-degree high temperatures again by late next week. There will be a little bit of cool air maybe late next week or next weekend, a week and a half out. But for much of the second part of September, certainly the third week of September and maybe the fourth week, we will have this southwesterly flow, and that is expected to lead to warmer than normal mean temperature. So I think that's certainly a significant change worth noting. The outlook also does call for above normal precipitation. It's done this. You probably will remember our discussions here for the last couple of weeks. And for most areas of the state, we have not seen above normal. It's been the opposite. A few locations have in the northern part, but most areas have not. And so if I would have drawn this map, I probably would have put maybe a near normal direction on this one for a lot of the state. I guess one thing we can say with this upper air pattern is that precip chances probably will be more frequent than they have been over the last couple of weeks. So look for a moderation in temperatures by later next week, and then continuing on into the latter part of September. 8 to 14 day outlook is almost identical to this, warmer and maybe ultimately a little bit wetter than normal again. But not looking for any heat waves. If you're thinking how hot or how warm would it be, it's just basically going from cooler than normal, which is where we've been over the last couple of weeks, to at least normal, if not above normal. And again, I would expect to see some 80-degree high temperatures by late next week. And with that, some continuity. I would also note that our revised monthly outlook for the month of September, which was released last week or last Saturday, it actually came out with Michigan being in a cooler than normal mean temperatures for the month of September, which is certainly a reason for concern. But I think it reflects an averaging from cooler than normal conditions is where we've been now, and we will be for the next several days, with moderation or with normal to above normal temperatures later. And there's further evidence of this here. This is the last 3 to 4 week outlook, which was issued last Friday, essentially for the third and fourth weeks of the month. And you can see that Michigan and much of the region, warmer than normal mean temperatures are forecast. Also, interestingly, given what we just talked about with precip, note that precip totals for this outlook are normal to below normal. And again, if I would have done that for the 6 to 10 day outlook, mine would have looked more similar to this particular outlook. So we will see, but I think the big news is out of the outlooks is we should see some warming here for the latter part of September. And so summarizing, in the short term, more of the same, cool, and well, mostly dry, although we do have a chance for some rain here later today, but then dry conditions through the weekend into early next week. I would also note here, this is almost famous last words, but at this point, after this morning with a little bit of frost, there are no, in the forecast right now, no frost or freezing temperatures anywhere. It doesn't look like that. It's difficult to forecast those events very far in advance, but given the upper air pattern we have, it would not be conducive. One exception to that might be Sunday night. In far northern parts of the state, we might see a little bit of frost again, but nothing widespread, I think, to worry about at this point. High temperatures generally in the 60s and 70s here for the next several days, and lows in the 40s and 50s, but we should see several degrees warmer than that by the latter half of next week. And that's also the forecast from the medium range of the direction, with towards warmer and maybe a little bit wetter than normal here into the second half. And with that, a reminder about our delayed planting resources guide from MSU Extension. You can see the URL for that. There's a lot of good information on that. Visit that if you haven't. And one last reminder too, please, if you could, have a look at the online evaluation and add your 2 cents, your comments. Those are always helpful in terms of preparing and knowing what you value and how you would like to see the virtual breakfasts go in the future. And with that, I'll wrap up and say thanks for your attendance and attention, and see if anybody might have any questions.
We did have one comment that if you have tar spot out in your cornfield, Marty Chilver's lab is wanting those samples even from confirmed counties, and that you can contact your local educator to have those brought down. We actually have a meeting tomorrow, so we could get some samples brought down and give them to Marty to have those be tested. And samples can be dried. You need to collect 6 or more leaves per field, and to please label the bag with like your name, location, etc. Well, if you're wondering what you're going to do on your Thursday mornings now, because this is the last virtual breakfast, I just like to remind you that on our webpage, the Field Crops webpage, we do have all of the presentations archived there. So if there's one you would like to review or you want to go back and see what Jeff predicted for the weather, that is accessible on our webpage. Again, that would be on the virtual breakfast webpage at the MSU Extension website. Otherwise, we of course will be doing this next year, but we also do have our winter series both online and offered in person across the state. So stay in tune and you'll find out when those dates are, and we'll be happy to see you there as well. And with that, I don't see any other questions, so we're all done. Thanks, everyone.